Oh, thank God. Hi, Becky.
Hey, hi, Susie. Is it working like it's supposed to work?
Becky,
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can barely hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
It's a little bit better, but not much.
I'm sorry. I'm using headphones. I guess it's not working too well.
Go to your audio settings next to the mute button and make sure that your microphone is selected, that it's the headphones that you're using. So a little up arrow next to the mic.
How about now?
No, you're still low.
Let's see. What about now?
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome.
So you got my email. I don't have an interpreter for this session.
Yes, I saw that.
Which is unfortunate. But then again, I don't show any deaf or hard of hearing faculty registered for this session. So just let everybody know that we don't have an interpreter. We couldn't get everything covered. We're very sorry. But we're recording it, and the recording will include an audio, a transcript when we download those recordings. Okay?
I will relay the message.
And I don't see Ariane or Jerry yet, but they may be getting in here a little bit late. Have fun.
Okay, thanks, Susie. Okay, Ariane, I just made you co-host.
Hello.
Hi, Jerry.
Hey.
So Jerry and Ariane, Susie said we weren't able to get an interpreter for this session. However, everything is recorded, so there'll be a transcript available for those who participated.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Thank
you. Let's see, we're at 56 now, right? Yeah. And it already says we're being recorded, so I don't have to remember my little note. That's good. Ariane, I have our names written on our different slides, and yeah, and you have them on yours, I'm assuming.
My physical ones are at the office.
Okay.
I remember which ones are mine.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, and if not, just tell me, you know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Can I ask a quick question before we get started?
Why, sure.
So this came up in my department meeting yesterday, so that's why I kind of want to bring it up. It's in regards to gender neutral pronouns, but in different languages. I know, for example, in Spanish, I know the gender neutral pronoun for Spanish that's been advocated, but for example, the French instructors didn't know if there was anything for French, and neither did the German. So if anybody has those resources, if they can send them my way so I can give them to my colleagues, that would be amazing.
Gender neutral pronouns for French, German, et
And
al.
any other language, I don't know
Yeah.
how many languages we have, but we had a few.
Yeah, we have Portuguese.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Becky Zhang, are you our facilitator?
Yes, I am.
Hello.
Hi.
Are we supposed to?
You can start at 1 o'clock. I don't have anybody's PowerPoint, so you should be able to share your screen.
Yeah, I have my PowerPoint. I'll be sharing screen and bringing up the PowerPoint
Okay.
shortly.
I'll help monitor any conversations on the chat and let you know if there's questions.
Okay, I want to welcome everybody into this LGBTQ cultural competency training. This is our first ever virtual one, so bear with us. We're glad to see you here, and we're hoping things start out smoothly for you this coming semester. Very glad to see you're here. If you can, mute your microphones until you want to, if you want to ask a question or make a comment out loud. Please mute your microphones until then so that we don't have that ambient echo stuff happening. And but don't hesitate to unmute and interrupt and ask a question out loud if you want to. If you have some sort of a question, though, that you would be more comfortable typing in the chat, then don't hesitate to do that as well. We'll work on answering those as best we can. Again, we're really happy to see you here, and I'm going to share screen in a minute. But first, I want to tell you that my name is Jerry Thurston. I'm a communication instructor here, and I've been doing these cultural competency trainings called the Safe Space Ally Project since fall of 2015. So it's about 5 years every semester. And I don't know, Arian and I have trained somewhere around 500 people overall, I think. That said, Arian, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Aryan. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I have been the president of the Allied Staff and Faculty Association for going on 2 years now. I co-founded that with my colleague Connor Calloway, and I've been helping Jerry out with this training. We've been co-presenting together for a couple years now.
Good.
And I should also mention, I am also the budget technician in DSPS.
Budget technician. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to share screen and see how this works for us. Desktop, sharing, and welcome. Let me see if I can do this very quickly. From the start. Okay. So let us begin. In these slides, you'll see our email addresses. Of course, our extensions don't so much apply right now, but you'll see our email addresses, and we'll share those with her. Forgive me?
I'm sorry, my extension does work. If you are dialing from a soft phone, you can reach me on my extension.
Oh, excellent. Okay, sorry about that. Arian's extension is 8937, and I'm best contacted via email. And please don't hesitate to contact us with anything you need. And so we begin.
All right, so what exactly is the Safe Space Ally program? So our program is a voluntary, it's a 2-hour training. It's voluntary. You don't have to be here. So if at any moment you want to check out of here, you totally can. But what it is it's a campus-wide network of faculty, staff, students who are trained in the awareness of LGBTQ identities, who understand the LGBTQ identities, who understand how LGBTQ inclusion makes our campus and the world at large a more inclusive place for everyone, and who have learned ally-shaped strategies. So basically, you're someone who has completed this training, you've got some resources, you know a little bit about LGBTQ people, and that enables you to be able to assist any LGBTQ students who come your way or visitors to our campus. And normally this would be a 2-hour training, but we only have about 75 minutes. So we're gonna go through this real quickly. This will not be something that we can use to give you guys the ally certification we normally do, because we have to train for a minimum of 2 hours to be allowed to certify people. So this is going to be more of a very quick, concise introduction to what would normally be our safe space training. So this is going to be similar, just a little quicker, basically.
Yeah, so you see that thing at the bottom of the slide that I have up right now about an ally agreement. That's not going to apply, but if you see those purple with rainbow ram horn stickers on people's office doors or in cubicles or something around campus, that means they've not only gone through the 2-hour full Safe Space Ally program training, but they've also signed this ally agreement, officially agreeing to be an advocate for LGBTQ equal treatment on campus. And so they are also, it's a silent way for them to let people around campus know that they are a safe person who has some knowledge and some resources, not an expert. And it means that they're probably a fairly cool person as well. And you're likely a pretty cool person as well if you're interested in this type of a training. I'm gonna show you a picture, and normally I tell a longer story about this, but I will truncate it because we're doing a briefer thing. This woman is this is an older picture of a woman named Judy Shepard. And Judy Shepard is the mother of a young man named Matthew Shepard, who was killed by homophobes back in 1998 outside the University of Wyoming. It's kind of a long story, but he befriended some guys just going out to a regular old bar as a college student of drinking age. And he ended up getting tricked by them basically and beaten essentially to death. He lived for 6 days after his attack, but he did die. Unfortunately, you know, his mother, Judy, she wanted to do something with her grief and to do something for her community in her son's memory. So she went around and she started speaking out against hate and homophobia and so forth. And she started getting a name for herself. She's just a regular gal, but she just started getting more and more of a following. And she ended up going to a communication conference that I attended in 2002 down in Long Beach. And she did one of the keynote addresses because of the theme of the conference. Long story short, she kept saying this phrase in her address. She said that her son was killed because he was gay. And you notice what's underlined there. She kept saying, my son was killed because he was gay. It was a really good speech that she gave, very meaningful in many ways. But someone after her speech, during question and answer, brought it up and said, you keep saying your son was killed because he was gay. And she said, I think that is inaccurate. I don't think your son was killed because he was gay. That positions us to understand that the reason that he's dead is because of something about him. She said, I think that's simply inaccurate language to use about what happened to your son. She said, I think your son was killed because his murderers were sexual supremacists. And you see how that kind of reframes the entire incident, that it puts the onus of pathology upon his attackers and not the onus of his demise upon something about him. And I think that's an important thing, a distinction to make right from the beginning as we move through, because we're going to get to a lot of technology, or excuse me, terminology and stuff that you can do. But I think that's an important beginning point to understand that people don't get mistreated at Fresno City College because they are LGBTQ+. It's because the people who are mistreating them are either well-intentioned but kind of ignorant about things, or that there's something wrong with them. Next slide.
Jerry, this is Becky.
Hi.
There's a few questions in the chat asking if there will be any full trainings available this semester. There's quite a few people interested.
Oh, really? Okay, full trainings this semester. Well, I don't know. I'm not one bit stressed at all right now, as all of you are. I'm perfectly calm. We can look into that. I will look into that, but I'm going to need a few weeks to catch my breath, as a lot of you are. But I hear that loudly, and I want to be able to do that. So if we can do a full-fledged one and schedule it in a way that makes sense for people to do a Zoom, I don't see why not. Thank you for that question.
There's also another question. Is there a list of current allies available online? There is not one online. We do keep track of who we have trained. I have a list at the office. Unfortunately, I saved it to a drive. I can't access from home remotely, but we do have a list somewhere. It's just not public. It's not publicized.
Yeah, and I have in this binder right here that I went and grabbed from my office, I have everybody who's gone through the training because I'm old school, I write things down in a table written down, and everybody who has signed an ally agreement and gotten one of these little purple stickers. And so I'm not sure how we can get that to you, but we can look into that.
Javier has a question. Was the phrasing in your introduction intentional, or was it an error in language?
Phrasing, what phrasing?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Javier. Which phrasing were you referring to?
Oh, yes. So in the beginning, so you ended up talking about the onus and the way we phrase language. And the example you gave was he was killed because he was gay, placing the burden on him for being gay, correct? But in the introduction, you had said he befriended the boys and he was tricked, which really it would be they tricked him.
Oh, well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's well said. I didn't really catch that sort of contradiction there, but I think that's a good point to be made. That, I mean, the simple descriptor is that he was a person who was misled by other people, but it could be more accurate or better stated to say that they were the ones who misled him. I don't think it was. I don't think it was his fault that he was misled. So your point is well taken. I think that they were good at hiding their true motivations.
We have another question in regards to the list of certified allies. Is that something we can direct students to email one of you for, or could we ask if there is someone trained in a particular department to support a student if they ask? We don't typically give out that information, but people should be having the Rainbow Allies certification sticker somewhere visible. They typically have their resources packet somewhere visible. So if they look for that rainbow, that's usually the rainbow horns, ram horns is usually a good symbol, a good signal that that person is a ally. And Jerry, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that there may be some confidentiality issues. Well, one of the purposes of these are known, an umbrella term for these is known as safe zone programs. And I believe they started in 1992 on college campuses. And the idea behind it was to be to have a silent visual indicator to folks on campus of who is safe to go see, who has some skills, some resources, and who is a kind and caring person with regard specifically to LGBTQ plus concerns and needs. So people put those stickers up, and you'll see them at different college campuses because ours is made specifically for our campus. You'll see those stickers up, and people also, when we're doing these face-to-face, we give out this trifold safe space ally resources trifold resources thing. And people will put this up in their office as well. They'll have a sticker on their door that they got, but they'll also put this up so that people have an indicator. When it comes to, a short answer, I guess, when it comes to giving a list out, I'm quite certain that there is very likely a small percentage of people who have gone through the training, who are allies, but who would like for people not to know that, to be honest, who just want to silently put up their sticker so that people can know that they're a safe resource, but they may not want that published across campus for several different reasons. It's something that I can talk to some others about. I think it's a good discussion to have with others, and frankly, I've never had the question before.
We have more questions. Someone asked if in virtual land, I was wondering about noticing allies on campus like we usually would. I was trained at Fresno State and relied on those visual markers too, but I'm now thinking of how to give that illustration to students. I would suggest one way to signify that you are an ally in a similar way is whenever you email a student or email anyone, include your pronouns after your name. So for instance, you would say Arian Reed. Underneath that, you would say my pronouns, he, him, his. That is an instant signifier to any LGBTQ student that you are a safe person, because that signifies that you understand that gender is more complicated and not as simple as people think. It's an instant signal to anyone who's transgender specifically as well, that you are a safe person for them to speak to because you understand gender identities, which is a part of the LGBTQ vocabulary and terminology we'll be going over as soon as we get through all the questions. We have a couple more questions. Do all students get information about this LA group? If you're talking about the Allied Staff and Faculty Association, that we try to publicize as much as we can. There have been emails that have gone out. We try to put out flyers and we try to be visible. I don't know how successful we are. Sometimes those flyers and things get torn down. In our safe space program, the flyers also sometimes get torn down, but we do have flyers across campus and we do try to make ourselves visible. We're not hiding. So we do try to make that visible. It's not necessarily in the new students package that I know of, though it would be great if there was, but there is a student club as well called the Spectrum Club for LGBTQ students. So that they typically do, they'll be out there during, I think it's called Rush.
Mm-hmm.
Club Rush, yeah. So they're usually out there advertising themselves. So we try to make it known as best as we can with the resources we're given.
And what we do is something that I've done, of course, face-to-face every semester until this one, is at the beginning of the semester, I out myself as an ally. I hold up actually one of the big posters that are all around campus, and I explain what this program is about, and that I am a safe person, and that anybody who has a sticker on their door or one of these things up, then that means automatically they've gotten some knowledge, some information that can be helpful, and they are a safe person to go to. So we encourage anyone who's gone through any of these programs, administrators, faculty, of course, classified, we've trained, and students, ASG and so forth, we encourage them to, if they want to, openly state, hey, I'm an ally in one way or another. These are all, it's a brand new virtual world for us. So these are new questions for us.
All right, thank you, Jerry. I think we're good to go. If anyone has any more questions, just please go ahead and feel free to leave them in the chats or to interrupt us with your microphone.
Okay, Arian?
All right, so do we even need a safe space program? Well, if you look at if you want to look at the data, for instance, Fresno and the Central Valley have consistently rated below average on the Human Rights Campaign, I totally messed that up. Human Rights Campaign annual Municipal Equality Index. That is so many syllables, oh my gosh. But what this report is it's something that they come in and they look at everything about your city. So they look at the resources, the laws, the jobs, do employers offer LGBTQ inclusive health insurance? Do they discriminate against people for being LGBTQ? Do we have laws, local ordinances and such in place to prevent discrimination? And what kind of, do we have like LGBTQ inclusive homo shelters, like all sorts of stuff. They look at everything and then they give you a score. And we have always rated below average, not just Fresno, but the whole Central Valley has always rated below average, sometimes close to average, but sometimes pretty far below, like right now, especially after some local resources recently closed down and stopped providing services to LGBTQ individuals. So we've been rating pretty badly now that that's happened, because we just don't have any resources. Well, I don't want to say we don't have any resources, but we have a lot less, and we've never even provided the average amounts in the beginning anyway. So we're not doing too well, and an estimated about 10% of the about 10% of the total population is LGBTQ. And what I mean by total population is people of all ages, all demographics, but specifically millennials. 20% of millennials, that's people aged 19 to 35, identify as LGBTQ. I believe that means like openly identifying. 24% of children under the age of 18, so this is going to be Generation Z, 24% identify as LGBTQ. And some people look at those statistics and ask why there are more LGBTQ people in the newer generations. And I would argue that there's actually always been about the same number of LGBTQ people within the human population. What's going on is that each generation is becoming more and more accepting. There's a higher rate of acceptance of LGBTQ people within each of the newer generations. And that level of acceptance among their peers, among their parents, et cetera, is allowing them to accept themselves and come out and live openly as their true selves instead of hiding it and trying to, you know, overcome it or something, which has been something that has historically been what a lot of people have had to do, is they've had to just, you know, hide their true selves and try to pretend that they're normal or like the majority.
Right, and it's because of people like you going to trainings like this that allows for more and more people to come out. So the population, the demographic, I believe has stayed consistent anthropologically, archaeologically. It appears to be pretty consistent across human history. But now people are actually like, oh, okay, I'm not going to get killed. Well, I have a less likelihood of being killed or harassed if I actually come out and am who I am. But two specific examples very quickly. The Fresno Bee reported in late 2017, a Fresno student at Bullard High School, Logan Pineda, is an openly gay student, was being hit with all sorts of manner of things, attacked both verbally and physically, being having full juice boxes thrown at Logan in all sorts of different ways. That's Bullard High School, and that's just a little while ago. Some of those abusers may have changed their ways, but some of them may not have, and some of them may be going to Fresno City College right now. So do we still need a safe space ally program, LGBTQ plus training? I think. And then secondly, specifically in spring of 2018, I had a trans woman come to me and say that they had no place to go to the bathroom. So I made this just a picture of a sign that I made to put on a single use bathroom that a faculty member or several faculty members kept locking because they didn't want students to be able to use them. But according to California state law at that time, and now, they have the legal right to have access to a single-use bathroom because of the way they are often treated when they go to multi-use bathrooms. I put this sign up, and the very next morning, fewer than 24 hours later, someone had scribbled out the stuff about transgender, genderqueer folks and written ugly things right on our campus in the Music Speech Building. So it does appear that we do need this stuff. I'm gonna kind of quickly put this slide up. And just as a reminder, I know Ari and you normally talk about this, but we also talked about kind of ripping through this particular slide. Just because someone is LGBTQ doesn't mean that they, you know, are at greater risk of suicide or something, but the way they get treated puts them at greater risk.
Yeah, it's not necessarily the fact that they're LGBTQ, it's more sort of the environment around them that raises suicide rates among people who are LGBTQ.
Sorry, Arian, I think that was your slide, sorry.
You're fine.
This one here, this is a type of graphic that many of you have seen. I won't spend much time on it, but we are talking more and more. A few years ago, this was a brand new thing for a lot of people to see, but now it's a fairly common image in different forms. That what we're seeking here with a safe space program at Fresno City College is to acknowledge and understand that certain people, in particular LGBTQ plus people on our campus, start with not equal rights and not equity. And so we're trying to make things better for everybody on this campus, not just hetero white dudes like me. Oops. Let me get this going. Okay, time for terminology.
And Maxine, I just want to let you know, I'm not ignoring your question, but we're going to go over ally tips in just a little bit. So we'll get to your question. Okay, so gender identity. Thank you. So first off, we have queer, which really probably shouldn't be under the gender slide. It probably deserves like its own slide, but anyway, so queer is an umbrella term for the LGBTQ community. It can mean a lot of things. It's typically used in regards to actually to sexuality, but it can mean it can mean LGBTQ, it can mean someone who, doesn't want to define their sexual orientation. It can be used in a lot of ways. This used to be a very offensive term, and some people do still find it offensive. Some people within the LGBT community do not use that term and do not like that term being used. And then there's some people like myself who actually use it to refer to ourselves. I don't like having to define my gender, my sexual orientation. So sometimes I use queer because it's just, it gives the impression that I'm looking for without me having to try to pinpoint my sexuality. So it's one that it can be used, but it's kind of a tricky one because some people in that same community also don't like its use.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
My name's Eileen, and I'm a nursing instructor there at Fresno City College. And that term I grew up with 1,000 years ago, and it was not a nice term 1,000 years ago. And I still see it as that term 1,000 years ago. And I'm trying to not be ignorant, but I'm very ignorant with a lot of this terminology, because when I teach students, I just flat out say, you respect and honor a human. That's it. I don't want to know anything else. That's it. We all bleed the same red blood. So take care of them. But this term, coming from a nursing person, it's real hard to figure out what an individual wants to be classified or called, because I'm not asking. I'm just saying, what's your name? I'm going to take care of you. That's it. But then they get mad because we're not saying the right thing. And I'm thinking, you know what? I just want to make you healthy. You go live your life any way you want. I'm done. That's it. It's a tough situation. Like you just said, it's a very difficult word. So how is ignorant people supposed to use it if it can't even be used the way you want us to use it, because it can't even be defined very clearly?
I'm just letting you know this is what the word means. I don't necessarily recommend using it, especially if you are not LGBTQ yourself.
Right.
It's.
I'm just saying that because people say it, and I see it as a bad word that I grew up with 1,000 years ago. Like I said.
Yeah, it used to be, but it was actually reclaimed during the AIDS movement. It was then reclaimed by an organization that was trying to capture LGBTQ people's attention to let them know, hey, AIDS is going on, this is how you prevent it, etc. And so it became politically, it was kind of politicized, and it became, it was reclaimed by the LGBTQ community and that word was used to gain people's attention for good reason. And so it actually became considered okay by people who are LGBTQ. But there are still some people who still feel like that is not okay, that word should not be used, etc. So if you're not LGBTQ, I don't recommend using it, but this is what it means. So when someone does use it, and they say, I'm a queer man, what they're trying to say is I'm a man who is LGBTQ, most likely in regards to sexual orientation, and I don't want to have to define my orientation, because maybe I myself haven't even defined it.
Okay.
That's what that word is. Otherwise, I would recommend not using it yourself.
Okay.
Unless the student says I am queer, and then maybe you could use it in reference to that student. But in other words, you might want to just say an LGBTQ student, just to be safe.
And you can also, like Arian alluded to earlier with regard to emails, but we're going to get into this a little bit later, but you can also simply ask, oh, can I ask your pronouns? What are your pronouns? Just in a regular matter of fact way. So you wouldn't say, are you queer? You could say, can I ask your pronouns? And if you asked me that for whatever reason, I would say he, him, his, just real quick, and on we go, and that lets that person know, oh, this person knows about that stuff. And so you're not using the word queer themselves, but if somebody does use it to you, say, oh, I'm a queer woman or something like that, then you understanding that they're self-identifying, then it doesn't throw you off, and
Right.
you just go on as well.
Okay.
Let's go on with genderqueer.
Thank you.
All right, so genderqueer is kind of like the gender version of queer. It specifies that your queerness is in regards to your gender. So your gender does not fit into the binary, which is male versus female, or that person rejects the idea of gender completely. Gender is largely a social construct, you know, that the whole idea that girls have to wear pink, guys have to like blue, you know, girls get to wear dresses, guys shouldn't, etc. That's, you know, that's a social construct. There's no reason why a guy cannot wear a dress or like the color pink. So someone who is genderqueer is someone who, you know, rejects those kinds of norms and or just feels that they don't necessarily identify as strictly male or female, that maybe they identify as someone in between or someone who is neither, who doesn't have a gender, etc. It could mean a lot of different things. It's a pretty broad umbrella term for gender. Transgender. So this one's going to be underneath it's going to be under the trans umbrella. So if you ever see just the word trans, that means people who are transgender, people who are genderqueer, people who are non-binary, etc. But transgender is an umbrella term that is the smaller umbrella because it only refers to people who identify as male or female specifically. So a transgender man is going to be someone who was born biologically female, but who identifies as a male, and vice versa. So this is going to be a smaller umbrella underneath the bigger one. There's also cisgender. This is going to be a very specific term for someone who feels comfortable with the gender identity that they were assigned at birth based on the biological sex that they expressed at birth. So if you were born with female genitals, then you were assigned female at birth. And if you still feel like you are female throughout your life, then you are probably a cisgender female. Agender. This is a fairly new term that came out pretty recently, and it's usually in regards to someone who feels that they do not conform to any particular gender, or can mean someone who generally rejects gender. You know, it's someone who feels like they don't have a gender, etc. So this is going to be someone who is neither male nor female, nor anything in between. Next slide. And does anyone have any questions on those gender terms?
All right,
All right,
sexual orientation.
All right, sexual orientation, gay. This is a term a lot of us are very familiar with, but let's go over it anyway. It's a term that is used in regards to people who can experience attraction towards someone of the same sex. And this can be used when referred to women as well. So women can say, you know, that they feel gay, that they feel that they are gay. Men can say that they are gay, etc. It can be used either way. It's typically used in reference to men, but it can be used by women too. Lesbian. This is going to be the same kind of term, but it's only used in regards to someone who is a woman who is attracted to women, whereas gay can kind of be used for both. Bisexual. This is going to be the person who can experience attraction for people who are males or men, people who are females and women. So what this means is this can be someone, it can mean someone who is attracted to cisgender women and cisgender men, or someone who is also attracted to transgender men and transgender women. People who, it's someone who is attracted to the binaries, basically. So someone who presents and, you know, identifies strictly as, well, not strictly, but fairly strictly as male or female. It's not the bisexual person is not necessarily going to be someone who is attracted to someone who's genderqueer, someone who is agender, who is outside of that binary. And the next one is pansexual. This is a fairly new term. This term is in reference to someone who can experience emotional and sexual attraction towards someone of any or all or many combinations of gender expressions. So this can be someone who can experience attraction to any kind of person, or it can be someone who isn't strictly limited to, in the way that the bisexual term is limited, to just binary people. Maybe this is someone who's attracted to people who are who identify as men, who are male, or who are androgynous, but not females. Or it could be someone who's attracted to all. It can really mean a lot of different things, and it's kind of an umbrella term in a way. Asexual. This is going to be someone who while they may experience emotional attraction, they do not necessarily experience sexual attraction. Some people use this term to refer to people who are, some people use this term when they are actually, when they do experience sexual attraction, but they just aren't interested in relationships. I would argue that they might be using that incorrectly, that the term aromantic was supposed to refer to people who are capable of romance, the emotional attraction, who just aren't interested in the sexual component. But you know, some of these terms can kind of, some people feel that they have more, that they mean more of this, but they, when you know, when their common definition is actually something else. You know, so these terms aren't quite set in stone, but this is generally how they're used by the vast majority of people who are LGBTQ.
Yeah, you know, at this point, there's a lot of terminology. Some of the terms, some of you are quite familiar with. Other terms, you may still be, your head might be swimming a little bit. So we offer you, Aryan, the
So here
genderbread
is our
person.
genderbread man. But I just want to say, in regards to the bisexuality on the previous slide, people who are bisexual, sometimes they don't typically have like a 50-50 split. Sometimes it's more like a 30-70 split. You know, they're more attracted to like this binary, like females versus males, or they're more attracted to males versus females. You know, it's not usually a 50-50 split. And when it comes to sexual orientation, we're not just talking about sexual attraction, we're also talking about emotional attraction, romance, you know, marriage and kids and wanting to spend the rest of their lives together, etc. Okay, I'm sorry. Now we can go to the genderbread man.
Well said.
So on the genderbread man, I'm sorry, I'm seeing some comments in the chat. So agender is a little bit different from non-binary. Non-binary can mean someone who feels that they're both male and female, or someone who feels that they are neither. It can mean someone who's pangender, gender fluid. Non-binary is a giant umbrella term. Under that umbrella are things like agender, the list, everything I just said, you know, gender fluid, all those other ones as well. You know, non-binary is an umbrella. It's kind of it's a bigger term for people who don't want to have to really define it. And then some people, they really get into defining it. Some people really know who they are, and they say, you know, I am a gender fluid, gender nonconforming, transgender man. You know, some people have it like really nailed down, and then some people are like, I'm just gonna say non-binary. And some people say agender specifically because they specifically identify with that definition. So I just wanted to go over that real quick. Okay, so on the genderbread man, your gender identity, that is who you truly are inside. That has nothing to do with your biology, although your biology helps you define your gender. So for instance, if you identify as male, but your body is not male, then you are going to be, then that's going to define you as, you know, transgender or non-binary or something along those lines. But gender identity, that is who you are inside. Whether you identify as a woman, as a man, or as someone who is neither, someone who is genderqueer, someone who doesn't even, you know, accept gender at all and thinks that gender is just made up and is a social construct purely, or maybe you're two-spirit, etc. You know, that's who you are truly. Gender expression, this is going to be how you demonstrate your gender. And what I mean by that is how you demonstrate it based on your behavior, how your posture, how you walk, how you sit, how you talk. This could be also how you dress, how you behave, how you interact, your mannerisms. You know, it's how you express yourself and how you express your true self, your true gender self. Your biological sex, this is going to be your body. This is going to be your genitals, your chromosomes. It could be, you know, whether you have breasts or not, etc. You know, this is your biological sex. It's, and biological sex is something that you were assigned at birth. You know, when you're born, they look at you and go, oh, this looks like a female, you're assigned as female. Or, you know, you're assigned as male. Or some people are born intersex, which means that they have the characteristics of both sexes or neither. Typically, they lean towards male or female, like they look a little bit more like one or the other. But sometimes they're pretty darn in the middle. So, and biological sex is something that becomes complicated when you are transgender and you transition and you now have you know, you've got certain parts but not others, and your blood work, you know, resembles that of, you know, someone of the opposite sex because you're taking those hormones, etc. You know, so sex can also become complicated later on throughout life. It doesn't necessarily. So I, for instance, like to say that my sex is non-binary because I, you know, have been altering my body. Sexual orientation. This is going to be your attraction, you know, who you're attracted to, who you are capable of spending the rest of your life with, and you know, who generally draws your interest, things like that. Do we have any questions on regards to this? I'm gonna look at the chat real quick, see if there are any questions in there.
Yeah, just let me know when you're ready to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I'm ready. I don't see any relevant questions to this one. All right. So after all that terminology, your heads might be a little underwater, but for the most part, you understand the most basic thing to understand here is that gender is not just male versus female. There's a whole variety to gender, and the same thing can be said for sexual orientation. It's not strictly this or that. There's so many different expressions people are using these days. There's actually, last year on the Trevor survey, what Trevor is an organization that helps students and kids under the age of 24 who are LGBTQ. It helps them with their suicide ideation, helps them out with that. It's a suicide hotline, basically. And they do a survey every year. And last year, kids were using about 100 different gender terms. So you don't have to know all these terminology. It's okay if people say, you know, I am a NB or I identify as a demi boy. You don't have to understand what all those different terms mean. You just have to, all you're here to understand is the fact that gender is more complicated than many people realize. That's what you're trying to get out of this presentation.
And I think before oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, you're not expected to be an expert on this. You know, this is just basic. We're just trying to give you all a basic overview of the complication.
Right, you know, and I think at this point, before we move on just a little bit, is that when you see the bottom portion of this slide, and you may be thinking, well, I need to get this right, but there's no way I can get this right, then there may be some anxiety and confusion related to that. And what a lot of people do, because we are, for very good reasons, we're sense-making creatures. We want to try to make sense of the world, and we also want to try not to screw up and have somebody get mad at us because we said the wrong thing or refer to them in the wrong way. It's completely understandable to feel some confusion and some anxiety for like, wow, that's just too many things to know. The thing that leads a lot of times to our population of LGBTQ plus folks on campus and in our society and on the planet is that when people feel confused or anxious, they oftentimes will blame the LGBTQ plus persons for their confusion and for their psychological discomfort. And that oftentimes manifests in maltreatment of folks. Whereas if we just take ownership of our own anxiety, our own confusion, and try to do the best that we can, realizing that we'll never be perfect, never get it all. I know some really serious experts on all of this stuff who are still like, oh crap, I said the wrong thing. So you're just gaining some extra knowledge so that you have a much better likelihood of treating people well and not unintentionally, you know, goofing up in some way. So you have to be kind to yourself with that, but not blame the LGBTQ community for your own confusion or anxiety. Next slide. All right, this is me, binarism. Some basic larger terms, larger terms are, one of them is binarism. And binarism is where the way that a lot of people put gender into just two categories, masculine, feminine, male, female, and they refuse to acknowledge that there is any more nuance, any more complexity other than there's men and there's women. There's masculine and there's feminine, and anything outside, any presentation, expression, behavior outside of that binary is problematic and wrong, well, that's known as binarism. It's born of heteronormativity, or a nice multisyllabic word, heteronormative. And to be heteronormative is to believe that heterosexuality is the norm, is the standard by which other presentations, other expressions and everything are to be judged. And that's known as heteronormativity. So an expression of that, let's say from a faculty's perspective, is if all of the examples in your lectures or on your test questions or something, if all of the examples are of Mark is married to Mary, you know, and they're all nothing other than examples of heterosexual relationships, you may be very nice to the gay students in your class, but your heteronormativity in all of your examples can make that person feel completely invisible, and can help lead them to say, you know what, this isn't really a safe place for me. They don't even see me here. And off they go to someplace else or drop out. Another term that's worth looking at is erasure. And erasure is when in a society we ignore the existence of genders and sexuality that are in the middle of the spectrum between, you know, fully male or fully masculine, whatever that means, fully, and fully on the other end of the spectrum. Well, if you never talk about, if you only talk about the sexual orientation of King George so-and-so was married to a female, but you also in your history class talk about King such and such from Egypt, whom you happen to know was gay and had a long-term gay same-sex relationship or something, but you don't mention that, well, that's heteronormativity, and it's erasing the middle spectrum and expression thereof. When it comes to heterosexism is born of all of this stuff as well. Heterosexism is assuming that everyone is heterosexual and should be heterosexual, and that heterosexuality is superior to any other sexual orientation, gender expression, or anything else. That's to be heterosexist. And then finally, a final is, on this slide, that is transphobia. Transphobia is, this is a lengthy thing, but transphobia is the great fear and loathing and discriminatory treatment of people whose gender identity, gender presentation, don't match the socially accepted way, the sex that they were assigned at birth, and so forth. And we see examples of transphobia tragically on a regular basis when people who are trans are attacked or mistreated. And this, I think still, Arian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the T in the LGBTQ plus acronym is still our most at-risk demographic in terms of mistreatment.
Trans women of color, especially.
Right, and there's intersectionality too. We haven't really even gotten into that until now, but there's the intersectionality of class, race, LGBTQ. So if you have a poor Black trans woman who is from an unaccepting family and who has been rejected by her church community or something, and who gets mistreated at their school, you have a person who is at great risk for all kinds of difficulties. So, how are we doing on the chat?
We're doing good. Can you go back to genderbread person real quick? I had something I forgot to say.
I'm gonna do it really quickly. There it is.
Oh, there we are. Okay, so I just want to also point out that none of these things, gender identity, gender expression, biological sex, etc., none of these things are connected. So when they change, when one item changes about someone, or when they realize that they are different than they had previously thought, the other things don't necessarily change. So just because someone changed their gender identity does not mean that their sexual orientation, for instance, changed. And it may not even mean that their gender expression changed. I know some people who are biologically female, who still dress very female, very feminine, haven't changed anything about themselves, and yet they feel strongly inside that they are a trans man. You know, they haven't even changed their name or their pronouns or anything, and they they don't seem to be in the, in the process of changing anything about themselves, but they still identify that way, and that's okay. And there are people who are like that. Most people, when they figure out that most people in their gender changes, they do change something about their gender expression, but that isn't always the case. And so none of these things are connected. I just wanted to say that.
Sure, and they may change their gender expression. I've known more than one person who has changed their gender expression for all kinds of reasons, and their sexual orientation has not changed. I've known heterosexual men who are biological males who started on weekends wearing a lot of makeup and started growing their hair long and wearing feminine associated earrings because, quote, I just like to look really pretty sometimes. And they weren't gay. They're like, no, I still like women, but I really like this stuff and I'm tired of hiding that.
Yeah, and it's a common gay culture also for men to dress up, in very feminine ways and actually, but still identify strictly as men and as gay. And even myself as a trans man, I'll still wear a dress now and then, but I still identify as a trans man even when I'm in that dress. Like it didn't change. So I just want to say that. We can go on.
Okay, so what is an ally? That's kind of where the rubber meets the road for a lot of us is, what is an actual ally? Well, an ally is somebody who confronts heterosexism, homophobia, transphobia, biphobia, heterosexual privilege in themselves first and in others. But they're the types of people who look at their own baggage first, because we have marinated in a heterosexist society and a society full of binarism and erasure and transphobia and biphobia and so forth. So just like we're having this national conversation about Black Lives Matter and Latinx lives matter and indigenous people's lives matter, that so many people like myself, European people or whatever, are looking at themselves and needing to go, okay, I need to identify my racist crap. Well, that's what an ally does first. They look at themselves first and realize that this work is a social justice issue. So what can an ally do? The first thing allies do is they avoid making assumptions. Like, hey, that person's wearing a dress. That person I'm identifying as a biological male who is wearing a dress, that must be a gay man. You got to avoid those kind of assumptions. So you can't tell a person's biological sex, their gender identity, just from looking at their appearance. It would be nice if things were really, if the universe were a real, simple either or universe, but it does appear to be just a gray area, much more nuanced, much more complex, and from my perspective, a much more beautiful thing than just simple this or that. I guess it would be nice if things were simpler, but they just aren't, and there's a beauty to it as well. Another thing, assumption to avoid, that if a person is LGBTQ+, that doesn't mean that they are attracted to you. It may seem like a funky one to even bring up, but sometimes if somebody comes out to you or you find out you've got a coworker, let's say you're a female and you have a coworker whom you find out in one way or another is lesbian, sometimes people automatically think, oh, I wonder if she's been hot for me this whole time. Maybe not, I don't know. But it's an assumption to avoid. We should also be using inclusive language that doesn't assume heterosexuality or that someone is cisgender in all kinds of different ways. One example very quickly is, let's say you are getting to know somebody new with whom you work or in your neighborhood, a new neighbor in your apartments or in your neighborhood or something, and you're just trying to get to know them and trying to give them a compliment at the same time, and you say, well, you're good looking. I don't see a ring on your finger. You got yourself a girlfriend? You're just trying to be nice. But right there, you have assumed that person is likely heterosexual when they may not be, and they may just look at you with a sort of a blank smile and go, no, not right now. And they now they don't feel safe around you. So an ally thinks about that kind of stuff before nobody's perfect all the time, but you do the best that you can. And we always respect confidentiality. We avoid the assumption that if somebody has come out to you as I'm a trans person, I'm a lesbian, that doesn't mean that you are now free to tell other people about that. We have to respect their confidentiality, unless they say, oh, I'm out to everybody, it doesn't matter. Then, okay, I guess, I don't know why you would go down the hallway in your office and start talking about somebody's sexual orientation. But it's a thing that needs to be said. Another thing that allies do is they speak out against anti-LGBTQ plus comments. And that is not an easy thing to do. And we're going to give you some tools here, if I hurry up, for how to go about speaking out. When something comes up, it usually comes up out of nowhere, and your uncle at Thanksgiving just says something super transphobic or really homophobic or something. And an ally is the type of person who doesn't just laugh nervously and let it go. They actually speak up. And an ally is somebody who is an active ally. They actually go to things like you are attending right now. They'll go to the Real Pride Film Festival, which will be virtual this year if it happens at all. I'm sure here in Fresno, the LGBTQ plus film festival here in Fresno. They'll go to the Pride parades in June. They'll watch the L Word or whatever, instead of just only watching things that relate to them or attending things that relate directly to their personal experience. And an ally is the type of person who apologizes. You're likely to goof. We all do. We're teachers. We're friends. We're family members. We're neighbors. And if you goof, just apologize. You're not expected to know everything or be perfect. Ariane and I like to say always, there's no expiration date on an apology. If you goofed up because you didn't know some of this stuff that you're learning today, and you might have goofed up with a nephew who's trans and who's transitioning right now, and you just kind of goofed up because you didn't understand it, you can go back and apologize sincerely and genuinely, and that likely will be a true tonic for that relationship and for that person. Our next slide is for my pal, Ariane.
All right. So how do we be an ally to our LGBTQ community?
Oh, forgive me. Sorry.
We can avoid assumptions about whether a person is trans or what their sexual orientation is. So, by the way, these tips are specifically for trans people in regards to being a trans ally. So these are going to be some very basic tips. I have a much bigger presentation that I give during in November during Trans Awareness Week, and then I was supposed to give one again on Trans Awareness Day, but COVID came in and kind of ruined all of that. So if you want something more in-depth, there will be something coming up later on. But anyway, these are just some very quick things I'll be doing. So saying right now. So right now, just avoid assumptions about whether a person is trans, and whether or not you think they're trans, also just try to avoid any assumptions about people's sexual orientation as well. Next item, thank you. So try to use the name, pronoun, and the term that the person uses to identify themselves. So if they say, my pronouns are this, try to use those pronouns as best you can. If they say, I identify as this, then when you have to, for some reason, use that identity later on in discussion of that student, use that same identity term that they use, etc. If you do not know what their name, term, etc. is, try to ask them privately, because they might not be out and they might not want to be singled out in front of their peers or be outed in front of their peers, etc. So try to do that privately. Establish how out they are before you ask or say anything about them to someone else. So for instance, if they do come out to you, if you do get to talk to them privately and discuss these things with them, and you want to discuss this with someone else, ask them first, hey, is it okay if I tell so-and-so about that you are trans? Or, is it okay that I, what are you out? Try to establish that, with them before you say anything about them to someone else.
And, as faculty, I want to add to that real quickly that there's that new thing on Canvas that allows you to put your pronouns on your profile, which I've done that as well. That can be another indicator. And also, as faculty, it's a really good idea to go to Name Coach in every one of your classes to see if any students, because you might have a student who's got a name that they know others find difficult to pronounce, and they'll record how they want you to say their name, or if they have a nickname. But also you may have LGBTQ plus people who put some information into Name Coach that will really help you to serve them with regard to these.
A trans person's real name is the name that they tell you. So sometimes when a trans person says their name, some people say, well, what's your real name? I think what they're trying to ask is what was the name that was assigned to you at birth, which doesn't typically matter unless it's like some sort of legal document you're filling out or something. But in general, you don't need to know that about them. You don't really need to know anything about them except who they are. And their name is who they are. So we just wanted to clarify that. And just because a person is trans does not mean they have had or even want hormones or surgery. About 20% of trans people do not ever transition in any way, shape, or form. But some people do. But a lot of people, they just do hormones or they just do like maybe one kind of surgery. It's very rare that people go through multiple surgeries and do all the hormones and all that kind of stuff. But that's the one that receives a lot more media attention. So that's the idea that most people have about trans people. By law, a person who is transgender here in California can use the restroom that they identify with. While this is not true for other states across the United States, this is true for California, especially for schools. Thanks to Title IX, we are able to enforce that here at school. So people should not be harassed for using the restroom.
Okay.
Any questions?
Sorry, this is Becky. There is a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Based on your definition of ally, what is the list of allies? Why is the list of allies secretive? Does that mean that they are actually allies? Asking for clarification. This is from Javier.
Thank you, Javier.
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's not actually, we're not trying to really keep it a secret. We just didn't actually get anyone's permission to publish this when we had people register as allies. So we just need to make sure that it's okay for that to be public before we just publish that.
Yeah, I mean, I personally know of more than one person who works currently at Fresno City College who have privately told me that they have asked me, are the people who work in my office or in my hallway gonna know that I came to this? Because if they do, some of them know my family, and I'm from an incredibly conservative Christian family that is not a welcoming Christian organization, and it could cause real problems for me. So while the intention is not secrecy at all, the intention is protecting someone who could actually experience some negative results of our just randomly publishing everybody who is an ally. There are considerations that Arian and I are going to need to talk about with administration to see if that's even something that's doable. We might have to get in touch with every single person we've ever trained over the last 5 years and get their written permission, and if not, remove them from the list and then publish only those. So it's a really good question. It's the right question, but secretive, I think, is an inaccurate term. Arian, you've got the first one, and we do one and then the other.
All right, so how do we confront LGBTQ phobia? First off, you want to always assume that there is an LGBTQ person or someone who cares about the LGBTQ community in that room, or in that scenario that is happening. So when you respond, when you see that going on, keep that in mind. Don't, just because they're your friend, don't just, pretend like you're okay with it. Like, no, let the people in that scenario know you are not okay with it, because for all you know, there could be a student walking by within hearing distance who just saw that going on, saw you not doing anything about it, not saying anything about it, and now assumes that you are not an ally, that you are instead someone who is homophobic or transphobic, etc.
And to build upon that, of course, this is just an extension of that first one. You should always speak up when something offends you, even if it's from an LGBTQ plus person. Your silence will be interpreted as, okay, this homophobic, this transphobic comment that I made is perfectly passable. Is it hard? Yes. So we have some advice.
And when you do speak up, try to personalize your comments. Try to say it, phrase it in a way that makes it about you. Try to say things like, I don't find that funny, or that's not okay with me. You know, rather than saying, you know, you're homophobic or you're transphobic, you know, rather than pointing the fingers at them, try to make it more about yourself and just say, you know what, I'm not cool with comments like that because I have strong feelings about the LGBTQ community. And so I just find homophobic comments like that are just upsetting to me. But try to make it more about you and not so much about that person.
And to further that, before I hit the next button, just like Ibram X. Kendi, I'm almost done with one of his books right now, but he says this in his book, and he alluded to it yesterday if those of you who saw him speak at Convocation yesterday. When you tell somebody you're a homophobe, you're a racist, then you're essentializing them as that's what you are. And many times that isn't the case. Many times they know that they're a good person. But if we point out that this behavior in this one moment was transphobic, or I'm not okay with that because, then we make it less about shame and blaming that person, and more about how you feel about discrimination against the LGBTQ plus community. I always use the example in our face-to-face trainings of, if you've ever had somebody who was like stepping on your foot, but they, like at a crowded party, and they didn't realize they were stepping on your foot. Well, you tap them on the shoulder and say, hey man, you're on my foot, that hurts, that hurts. They're likely to turn around and go, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. In the same vein, when we speak up about something that is harmful, we can realize, I'll bet that person probably doesn't mean to be mean. Some of them do, that's true. But a lot of times it's merely born of ignorance and unintentionally harming someone. And if we point it out in a more loving, more invitational way, we have a much better chance, according to hard research, a much better chance of that actually planting a seed in their changing their behaviors over time than if we just go, you suck.
So just try to practice it. So every time you see an instance of homophobia or transphobia or something like that going on, try to step in. And you know, you're gonna fumble the first few times. That's totally natural as an ally, to feel awkward about it at first, but eventually you kind of get your own rhythm going and you start to figure it out. But you have to practice first, even though it's really scary to have to speak up, especially to your own friends or your own family. You know, it's really scary, but it's important because it teaches them, and you know, it gains more awareness and more increasing the awareness of LGBTQ identities, and you know, in a very positive way, can really help change the world. You know, it all begins with each one of us.
Right. It doesn't have to be a big dramatic fight like this last thing says. It just be helping people understand the damage that they're doing to other people without oftentimes realizing just how damaging it is. Now here we are with 4 minutes remaining, right? So my question is this: Arian, do you want to do one scenario, or do you want to just take questions for the next 4 minutes?
We could try doing a scenario real quick, and then we can answer some questions.
Okay, don't get dizzy. Okay, my friends, what would you do if this happened? By the way, this is from my real life. Actually, it wasn't at this campus. It was at College of the Sequoias back in like 2000. That said, what would you do if this happened as a faculty member? You're talking to colleagues near your office, and a young couple, 2 men, walking and holding hands, stop outside a nearby classroom. One tells the other, okay, just come to the cafeteria after class. They peck each other on the lips, and the other says, love you, and walks into the classroom. One of your colleagues rolls his eyes and performs a vomiting gesture loud enough for the guy leaving to hear it. As an ally, in that moment, it just comes out of nowhere. What would you do?
So please go ahead and unmute yourselves and let us know what you would do in that situation.
I think I would just call him on it, and I would say, well, you know, that was pretty rude. Why would you do that? That's insulting to that person. You know what you feel should, you should just go ahead and keep that to yourself and be more understanding. Not everybody is going to be like you. So, we're all different, and it's okay. If turn it around to your situation, what if you're with your wife and you kissed her goodbye and somebody did that to you? How would you feel? You need to see how it feels, carry some of that empathy and understanding, because, that's what I would probably tell them, something like that.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, sometimes I don't even kind of confront it in so too much. I just ask, well, what do you mean by that? I mean, I kind of put them in that position to explain what their intention was. And sometimes when they have to think it through and articulate it, they are already realizing the error in that.
A time-honored strategy. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think as allies, it's important to be active allies. Otherwise, we're not really allies, right? So I would place that burden on me and say that offended me. And it is not okay what you said. One, it gives the two people that it was directed at that ability to see that there is an ally actively present without the focus being placed on them, because that's already a horrible situation to be in. And so making sure the focus is on you, how you feel, that way the conversation stays between you and that colleague, and even saying that is not acceptable. You should never say something like that. You should apologize for that. And I think it's important that we, just like the several talks about being anti-racist, we also have to be anti-homophobic, and making sure that we call it out the moment it happens, because when we let it linger, then it's us saying it's okay to say that around me, or say it here.
It's really beautifully said, Javier. I would say, because we're really here at the end, that usually when we have more time, somebody usually says, well, the first thing I would do is I would go run and catch that guy who saw the vomiting gesture and apologize to him and let him know that I'm going to do something about it. That was totally uncool, and I'm going to do something about it. Because if you don't go catch that dude, then his partner is going to meet him for lunch in the cafeteria after class, and he's going to tell him, now you've got two people who are exposed to this attack. And so that can be another part of the response, is making sure that you care for the person who was attacked. We want to thank you for joining us. It's 2:15, possibly 2:16. It's still 2:15, and I'm not sure how we're supposed to wrap this up, Becky.
So I will go ahead and end this session, but if everybody can just make sure you fill out the evaluation for the presentation on either the app or the online event guide. Other than that, we are good to go. Thank you, everybody, for participating.
We thank you so much for all of your comments, and we're going to try to respond to those questions that have come up and get some answers as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.